glad to be here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen just to kick us off. Hopefully everyone can see that. Very excited about today's presentation. Very pleased to be part of the event today. I think it's very exciting. What we're going to talk about today is some of the different ways that companies in the life sciences world are using to engage stakeholders. We're going to talk about some of the different technologies. We're going to go through Estefania's experience and kind of how she views the world at Takeda. And then we're going to talk about the future as well, where these technologies are headed, and what opportunities and options are going to be available for all of us in the coming years. So hopefully it should be a fun event. And again, thank you so much for coming. If you have questions, you can go ahead and ask those through the interface for the meeting. And at the end, we hope that we should have time to address any questions that come up, and definitely look forward to everyone participating on this call in the discussion. So I guess to go a little bit further with introductions, I can start with myself, and then Estefania, you can jump in. But so I'm Lance Hill. I'm the CEO of Within3, and the founder, actually. So when the idea was on a napkin, I was there with the napkin. And what we do as a company is we really focus on helping life science organizations manage insights, engage stakeholders internally and externally more effectively, and really generally decrease and improve communication across all processes. And we do that pretty broadly throughout the industry. We work with all 20 of the top 20 pharmaceutical companies, very leading med device, med tech, digital tech, biotech, pretty much across the gamut, both large and small. So the perspective that I'll be bringing to this is a bit of a technologist one, and a bit of how I know that organizations are using different sorts of engagement technologies. And that's especially helpful now, obviously, with COVID and travel restrictions disrupting traditional ways of engaging key physicians, patients, et cetera. So that's a little bit about me. Estefania?
Thank you, Lance. Thank you, everybody, for this invitation to share with you our experience. I'm Estefania Torres. I'm therapeutic area lead in immunology in medical affairs team in Takeda, Mexico. I'm happy to enjoy this morning to share this experience I mentioned, but also to share that our commitment as Takeda company to transform and to develop therapies that contribute to better life for patients. And through this kind of experience that we are going to discuss, involving technology is also very positive and constructive way to do it, to achieve it. So thank you.
So great, thanks. So let's jump in. I'm going to go through a little bit of an overview of some of the technologies that we're going to be talking about today, just so we're all on the same page. And then the meat of the 45 minutes will really be hopefully Estefania and I talking through different experiences and things that Takeda is doing and she has done personally. And then we'll talk about some of where we're headed, where the future lies. So when you think about virtual meetings or virtual engagement, what I want to do is split the world into kind of two ways of looking at it. So one is real-time meetings. Real-time meetings are like what we're having right now: webinars, video calls, video conferences. And most of the time when people think about virtual meetings or virtual engagement, this is what they mean. They mean hopping on a technology like this, like Zoom, and being able to have a discussion in real time. And so real-time meetings require a number of different things. They require that everyone is in the same kind of virtual place at the same time. They require that everyone is speaking the same language, that everyone has great bandwidth connection to be able to handle that meeting. And they're good alternatives to the traditional live meeting, in that you can see people's faces and things of that nature. The more folks get on the call, like when you see the screen on the left, because only one person can be talking at a time, it makes it more and more difficult. The more people are involved in a single meeting, so it typically ends up being that a few people talk quite a bit, and many others don't say that much or go off screen or those sorts of things. But real-time meetings are, I think at this point, every organization in the world certainly has this in their repertoire and are using these types of meetings within their kind of palette of tools to engage with stakeholders. The other type of virtual meeting is an anytime virtual meeting. And so this is something that you see a lot with online universities, where instead of saying, we're going to get together, for me, it's 1:30 Eastern time at this time and have a conversation. Instead, there's a virtual room that gets set up, and the room might be open for a few days or a couple of weeks. And the room is filled with content and questions and people and profiles, very similar to how social media sorts of interactions work. And it's a very structured place. And folks can log in. A physician can log in the morning, in the afternoon, after rounds, over the weekend, to interact with content, with material, and with each other. These sorts of environments, again, really traditionally were heavily used in the training arena to help students with varied schedules and varied capabilities in terms of technology be able to interact and learn. And these technologies have since been applied into the business world very, very heavily. And so at our company, we provide a platform that does this. And we conduct thousands and thousands and thousands of virtual engagements every year on this sort of platform. So some of the advantages of an anytime platform versus the overtime platform is that this sort of platform does not require everyone to be at the same place. So from a convenience point of view, it offers a lot more options. Instead of trying to arrange a meeting at a time where external stakeholders, especially busy physicians as an example, can all be there together. This really allows them to opt to participate with industry at a time that's convenient for them. It also allows time for people to kind of think and research topics before they answer and interact and respond. And so this type of engagement, oftentimes you get very thoughtful, considered sorts of interactions, as opposed to more the spontaneous, here's what I'm thinking about right now. I've been on a number of advisory panels myself, and I know that when you're on those as a participant, you're kind of half listening, you're half thinking about, okay, what should I say next, and when should I say it, and that sort of thing. That can be a little stressful. This sort of environment is very, very different, in that you're not really competing for any of that airtime. So this type of environment is quite different. And when we talk about a hybrid engagement, which is really the topic of today's call, what we're really talking about is using these two styles of virtual engagement in concert. So using real-time virtual engagement and anytime virtual engagement together to get the best outcomes, to have the best interactions, the best dynamic for our customers, as well as to make sure that we're getting the insights and feedback that we need to make business decisions and move forward. So within the anytime virtual engagement sort of arenas, just to give you a high level view of some of the capabilities that these platforms typically have. So they're very much based around conversation. So they're not survey tools. They have a lot of social media type tagging and notifying and alerting sorts of tools where people can have kind of very much deep and robust conversation, open-ended, quantitative, multiple choice sorts of interactions, all sorts of different things, supporting video and multimedia and so on. They also typically have a lot of capability around documents. So a lot of the work that happens within life sciences, whether it's being, patient education materials and you're going back and forth, or it's a commercial, sort of program and you're looking at materials that you're going to be presenting at a medical congress, the ability to edit, co-author, comment, discuss those sorts of materials in a very concise way is a hallmark of these tools, and they're quite good at that. They also allow a lot of flexibility and interaction. So these tools, language is no longer a concern. So if you're dealing with a global group, they automatically translate. So I know there's translation on this call in real time. These tools allow, I can log in and my native language is English. Then if Estefania's native language was not, then she could be interacting in her native language, and we could communicate with each other just seamlessly within these tools without having to worry about the language barrier. And then finally, the output of these sorts of tools is very structured. So it makes it easier and faster to consolidate the output. So in a real-time meeting like this meeting is being recorded, and Zoom technology, as an example, has the ability to deliver a transcript. And it gets it maybe 80-ish% right. If you've ever seen like the output of a Zoom transcript, when you start getting into medical terms and things like that, it's typically not very right. And when you have a lot of people on a call, it has trouble kind of knowing who's saying what and what the context is. And so when you get the output of a meeting like that, the notes that you take and how difficult it is to organize those creates work after the meeting to make sense of what happened. These sorts of tools structure the output a bit better, so they can be easier. You get a lot of output with these tools, but it can be easier at least to understand the context of the output and begin to work with it. So those are some of the technology capabilities. And when we look at hybrid meetings, these are kind of where the strengths and weaknesses are of both tools. So neither tool is perfect for everything, and it shouldn't be thought of that way. It should be thought of, how do I mix and match? So if your goal is a lot of back and forth interaction and full participation, video conference tools are good for smaller groups. If I have 4 people or less, or 5 people, and I want to make sure everyone can talk and have an opportunity to contribute, a video call is good for that number. If you start getting larger, if you think about, you have 10 people and you have an hour and you want everyone to contribute equally, and you get maximum participation with no waste in moderator time, and people can't connect and all those sorts of things, everyone gets to talk for 6 minutes, and that's all. And so the larger the group gets, the less video conferences work for really group dialogue. It turns into more presenting. Some smaller set of people will present. The online discussion platforms handle large groups very, very well because you're not competing for airtime. But they're also not as spontaneous in the sense that you can't kind of have the quick back and forth that you would have, or the nonverbal pictures and interactions that you would have. So the environments are quite different. And we see companies mixing and matching these together. Activities that lean towards the scientific or the education in terms of bidirectional discussion, data reviews, things like that, we see tend to lean towards the online discussion platforms. A lot of times things that are maybe more commercial in nature can sometimes lean more towards the video conference as a center of gravity, but clients mix and match all the time. So that's kind of an overview of the technology event, of the different types of technologies. Life science organizations, as everyone in this call knows, use these technologies all throughout the business. So dealing with external stakeholders, whether it's in clinical and R&D, investigators, into publications and so forth, through commercial, all through medical affairs. If you think about medical affairs, pretty much the purpose of medical affairs is to communicate scientific information. And so, the whole premise of why the organization exists, in a sense, is really to try to figure out how to communicate better with the outside world, and these technologies can help. And clients use these all the time internally too. We see all across the industry. We have everything from creating annual budgets to, Congress huddles at medical congresses and so on and so forth. So these virtual engagement technologies are used ubiquitously across the industry at this point. And I think it's been much further accelerated with COVID and the travel restrictions that has caused. Okay, so that's kind of the overview and the preview. Let's get to the fun part. So Estefania,
thank you.
Welcome, glad to have you. I'd love to, maybe hear from you. That it's been an interesting couple of years, to say the least. What do you look at as kind of the largest challenges that you face? And maybe talk a little bit more about your role and how your role requires, communication to be effective.
Yes, well, the first challenge that we faced in the past year it was a change, or to break our paradigms regarding the engagement, because in the past we used to have this kind of engagement with the key opinion leaders and the healthcare physicians in a place, in a venue, a space where you could have this face-to-face interaction on real time. But after the last period of pandemic, we have to change that. No? So we need to prepare to be more resilient in this aspect and to explore new ways to do our job. Because at the end, if in the country and every part in the world we're working to face the challenge that represents the pandemic, the patients, other patients, the rest of the population were having another conditions that need our attention, as we discussed during this morning. And in this case, for example, in my therapeutic areas, there is core disease are primary immunodeficiencies. The patients are living with these conditions, exploring the difficult moments regarding for example, in hereditary angioedema, to have a crisis that can compromise their lives of patients. And in the other hand, for example, primary immunodeficiencies related to the managed or body auto antibodies, it's important to mention that they live with recurrent infections. So we need to understand what is around the patient in the ecosystem and identifying the pain points in the patient journey. And the way to do it is to have the feedback from the key opinion leaders, the HCPs, and we need to know it. We need to work on that in order to define solutions together in collaboration with the physicians that can contribute to improve the patient. So the way to do it is to have these kind of engagements. And we can't wait until the end of this crisis that we are living now. So to have this virtual engagement help us to embrace and to find this kind of solutions for the patients. And it was not easy, I have to say it, to include it, because you have to identify the internal barriers that you could have inside your team. For example, we are not so familiar at the beginning with the resources, so you have to identify the type of resources that you already have available in the company, and then explore it and identify which one is more suitable to use for our projects. And in our case, one of them was the platform of Within Tree that helped us to develop the project that we need to execute. In the case, it was an advisory board, and it's important to mention that we need to develop the capability of creativity, or to have this ability, this skill very well established, or if it's not established, we have to develop and to challenge our team to do it, because as you mentioned in your previous few minutes ago, we need to develop several resources, or to make it available for the key opinion leaders, in order that they can contribute to build a very straight insights for us, and to take decisions in this according to this information. So that's why regarding internal barriers, but also we have to identify external barriers that can compromise the adoption of this virtual engagement from the physicians. In this case, for example, some of them were not so familiar with these kind of resources. So in these cases, for example, you have to go in the individual way, if it's possible, and explain how to use the resource, and be very patient. And I can say that at the end is very successful, the way that the physicians can adopt this resource to work, and to share knowledge and experience. So it's really positive.
That's great. Well, I'd like to dive into some of that if we can. So for the project that you're mentioning, you talked a little bit about educating yourselves and your teams on the different types of resources and tools. Why did you do that? What led you to want to look at different alternatives to begin with? And how was that process? Did you find that to be straightforward? Or did you find that to be very difficult in terms of internally to CADA and your local teams, getting everyone on the same page?
Well, first of all, as a leader, you have to push them to explore these new resources. And of course, there is a fear, there's this is something new for everybody, but you have to try it and to explore it. There is the risk, of course, but if you understand very well the resource, the tool, the platform, and I think I recognize that it was really important to have a very close communication between Takeda and within TREE to establish the project, to succeed in the project, and to have a very clear step-by-step process of adoption. So in this way, it's more convenient for the team to change the mind, and also to provide other resources to have an internal space to discuss this kind of resource and the way that we can take advantage of this. For example, regarding this advisory board that we had experienced, we focus just to develop the agenda, to define the topics that we need to discuss with the key opinion leaders. So, and avoid other things that in the past it was a madness for us. For example, to request airplanes tickets for some key opinion leaders that came from the inside of the country, or to discuss the accommodation or the venue, a lot of things that we have to sometimes discuss with the agency. And now we can just focus to work and to think about the most important regarding the patient journey, and the way that we can work together to identify the core issues and solutions for the patients. So I think that's the most important, and continue in reinforcing with my team that it's important to identify new ways to work, because also we decide to invest more or less several weeks to develop this project. For coming projects, we need to think a different way to do it, because it's something that we need to also include in our projects to generate experience for our key opinion leaders and the HCPs, and this kind of experience should be positive for their own professional development. For example, to create an environment of networking where they can share each other. We include in this project to have 1 hour spaces every 2 or 3 weeks, in order that they can share, they can discuss together, not just to have the opportunity to discuss inside the platform, but also to have these opportunities to see each other, and to have this very close conversation. Also, they were in different places in the country, you know.
So that's the hybrid at work. So that's mixing the two venue types, the real time. So using, it sounds like the anytime sort of platform throughout the week is kind of the place where a lot of the discussion happens, but then bringing everyone back together for kind of the in-person touch as well, to maybe talk about what some of the topics were over the week, or maybe even talk about what's coming, in the next step of the program, it sounds like.
Yes, and that provides an environment more familiar. We receive a feedback, and they feel very, very comfortable with the platform, but also with opportunity to be close, because also because of the pandemic, now a lot of people is at home. Even some of the physicians that are involved in the hospital, some of them for personal conditions, they can stay in the hospital, they need to stay at home. But through this resource, it was more easy for them to be close, to share each other. And the most important, to identify some solutions that can contribute to improve the management of the patients. And I think that's the most valuable for them, and also for us, to contribute together to identify these key elements that can change or accelerate to change the patient journey.
So I want to explore that a bit further in terms of the collaboration that you experienced, but just kind of finishing off, kind of the impact to to people's real lives. I think we're all with the pandemic in situations where we probably spend a lot more time on Zoom meetings like this than we ever thought we would in our careers. And yet here we are, and our KOLs and physicians are no different in that their schedules are also really impacted by the pandemic. Did you find that offering the flexibility of the hybrid sort of interaction, was that appreciated by the physicians? We see some clients will try to do things like what we're going to do is like a 4 or 6 hour, advisory board webcast sort of call and have people try to block off a day to do that. What you did was quite different. It sounded like when you had people together, you had shorter time frames, and it was a little more convenient probably on the schedule.
Yes, we explore to have these short sessions. It's different. We are right now in an important session sharing and to have on demand, but for the purpose of an advisory board, we decide to have this space for questions to share each other, and to have this space of 1 hour session in a specific day in a specific week. But regarding the first point of your question, I think it's really important to have this flexibility in the way that the key opinion leader of the healthcare physician can participate to develop or to execute this activity. We identify, for example, that most of them were more suitable to be involved in the platform in the middle of the day. It was strange, and a few of them, they feel more comfortable to consult or to provide information at night, and middle of the night, no? So it's interesting to have this experience, because we learned that we need to provide resources to our key opinion leaders and also to our HCPs, resources that can the people and the person can decide when to use it. We need to be more flexible in this way. And if we are flexible, we can also have more collaboration. No, it's a new way to collaborate. Sometimes it's not necessary to have on real time. But in this way that we have in a hurry, we have a lot of challenges in our daily activities. We have to consider to provide these kind of resources, because at the end we are looking for together to find common solutions. And if it's this solution, this resource help us to do it, from my point of view, we have to continue use it.
So how did you find the collaboration? You mentioned that some of the KOLs, this sort of platform was newer for them.
Yeah.
And so I assume there's always a fear when something is new that what if people don't use it, or they don't like it, or you don't get the same sort of input that you might get, thinking back to the days of live meetings, that it's different. How did you find the collaboration, the participation? What did you notice as far as that went?
Well, it was very important, this point, because the collaboration, it was between Takeda and the KOL, providing the support to explain how to use, how to manage the platform. It's easy. It's a very friendly use of the platform. But the most important is it's the first session where the KOL have to open their profile or to update it. It was easy. I can say it was in that way easy to use, easy to resolve. But the most important is identify the KOL that it is not suitable or is not technology friendly. No, it is like in this way. And you have to be very flexible and to organize a specific meeting to discuss with them, with him or her, the technology issues that he or she is facing, and the way that we can support from Takeda side or from within 3 side So it was not a big problem. Yes, I would say that mainly.
What about the quality of the discussion and the quality of the feedback in terms of meeting your goals?
Yes, we achieved that goal. We received more than 700 comments from the key opinion leaders. That it's really an amazing number of comments. But the most relevant is, as you mentioned, you could have or get the transcript of all of this information. And after the session, we receive this transcript and we decide to analyze and to review several times to identify these key insights that can contribute at a high level or as a priority to resolve or to find solutions for the patients. But I think it's important to have it in a common or traditional advisory board at the end, as we know, and everybody here in the room could have this kind of experience where you have 10 or 12 people discussing. At the end, only 3-4 persons are finally discussing, no? And the rest is just saying, okay, I'm agree. But in this way, you have the questions, you have the information, and we decide to have these blocked answers not available for everybody. So everybody in the room should provide data and discuss. And it was really interesting because you obtain a lot of different point of views and other are complementary, but the way to get this information, it was really interesting and very positive for our projects in Takeda.
Yeah, that's a great, interesting point, that dynamic that we see a lot. In a real-time meeting, a lot of times whoever's the loudest or the most aggressive in their opinion, or maybe the most senior amongst the KOLs, are the ones who have the greatest share of voice. And other folks, for a variety of reasons, either they're uncomfortable, they're thinking about something else, maybe they're not mentally present at that particular moment like you would like them to be, and you don't really get a lot of that feedback. And in any time sort of world, because people are going in whenever they want to, and they're not competing for airtime with other people, and they have the ability to think a little bit about what they want to say, you get a broader participation, you get more of everyone participating at once. And that creates, you mentioned those 700 comments, it creates a much higher volume of output because you're getting it from different people, and you can begin to compare and see. We get a lot of comments that folks are surprised in an online environment, the difference in who's most vocal versus maybe in a video conference sort of environment, when you remove that social dynamic that comes with people trying to talk in real time, and that they get insights from people they wouldn't have expected, or maybe kind of rising star sort of folks with et cetera. So that's a big component. If your goal in doing a session or doing an advisory board or some other engagement is really just to get the opinion of the top 2 or 3 people, then that's not as useful. But if your goal is in fact to get a broad range of opinions, this sort of technology works, has a great advantage there, the way it's set up. So what do you see going forward? What are your plans? And now that you've started to implement some of these different tools in what you do and trying to make patients' lives better, what do you think the future is for your team?
The future is for sure to keep in mind to have these virtual engagements. Recently, a few weeks ago, the Medical Science Liaison Society published results of survey that it's expected after the pandemic that over 60% of the physicians will prefer to have this hybrid model of engagement, virtual and face-to-face. So it's important to keep in mind to work on this. Nowadays in Mexico, the condition is not so easy, to have these face-to-face interactions. So we need to work on environment, digital or virtual environment. But the most important is to keep in mind our purpose to the patients and the community. And with this in mind, we have to define what kind of resource we are going to use for a virtual engagement. And that's more than a virtual. I think the most important, as you mentioned, and we have discussed, is the hybrid engagement, and defined according to the needs and the project, the way to do it. We need to continue working with very high level of creativity. I said that, and I reinforce it because our colleagues, our HCPs and key opinion leaders are working in different environments, and we need to generate this environment where they can express themselves in a very easy way. So that's part of our challenge to do it. And at the end, to keep in mind that the patients are the core benefactor of our decisions. We need also to consider why not to invite the patients to have some initiatives that can be benefits from this kind of resources platform of Within Tree. No? So it's not just for key opinion leaders, for HCPs. Also, we can invite the patients to be involved inside this resource to improve their condition for a better adherence treatment, or for in other situation is to improve their knowledge around the disease or the conditions, or only focus to improve the quality of life of the patients as other core key points in the conditions of the patients.
Yeah, that's a great point. One of the things that I think is kind of a side effect or a relic of kind of the live meeting, historically for years and years and years, is that those meetings are very expensive to produce. You mentioned the logistics and the scheduling and the venue and the meals and the flights and all of those things. And so that historically led companies to engage with kind of higher end key opinion leaders to justify the expense of such a meeting. And maybe not as much engagement with other sets of stakeholders within the ecosystem. In the virtual landscape, the cost of convening those meetings is much, much less. And the logistics and the overhead is virtually non-existent on the anytime side, but certainly even less on the video conference side. And so that really allows organizations to bring patients into the discussion much more directly than perhaps they had done in the past, or to bring other types of physicians or allied health professionals and so forth into the discussion that maybe wouldn't have qualified as a top key opinion leader, where we had a budget to be able to only, meet them once or twice in a live way. And so certainly not only do these technologies widen who participates in the meetings, but also what type of people can participate with industry to really help solve the problems of how do we make sure that patients are getting diagnosed correctly, getting the right treatments, and getting better and having better quality of life. So it is very interesting that the broadening of the communication tool set broadens our ability to touch more people.
Yes, and you mentioned a very important point. Are the resources, the economic resources, that we need to identify the best way to use it, and through this resource, the Within Tree platform, for example, we identify that we can destinate some other budget to do all the complementary activities that can benefit more the patients. So it's really important, no, to in the way that we are defining our project, to identify the right resources in every step, and to explore that it's important not just to focus in the execution of the project, but also that it's important the next steps after the project, for example, to have the feedback, to obtain the transcript of the information, but also the opportunity to the continuity of the project through this resource, because also when you are in the real-time project or in a specific venue, sometimes it's not possible to move the people around several places. So, and with this kind of resource, that is possible. No, you can do it in several times and along through all over the year, and it's more convenient in this way too. And I think the most important also is that we can save time, because it's invaluable in Spanish. And I think it's also important that we can save time for everybody, for the key opinion leaders, for the HCPs, but also for the staff team involved in the project. And this time that we are saving, we can decide to involve it or to dedicate to other important things related to our project. But why not to have also ourselves a better quality of life? That it's important to patients.
Absolutely, yeah. It's really, that can't be stated enough. I think the opportunity it gives teams to innovate, and not innovate just on the technology, but innovate with how you want to engage stakeholders, how you want to think about programs, how inclusive you want to be. All of that opens new doors, because you're not constrained to the idea of trying to fly people to a place or trying to get people to block out, large blocks of hours out of their day to be online and be present and be interacting as you would in a real-time only sort of setting. So I know we're running up against time. So this conversation has been great. I want to touch just for a couple of minutes on the future on some of these technologies as a technologist we're innovating, and then maybe ask a couple of questions if we have time. But I guess what I will say is the industry on the technology side is really still in its infancy with what these tools can do. We at Within3, we're applying advanced artificial intelligence and natural language processing to make these engagements more effective, to be able to in real time help folks like you, Sonia, understand what's happening within the discussions, what the themes are, what the trends are, what some of the outputs are, so you don't have to spend as much time analyzing that on the way out. We're working on innovating with helping identify who the right key opinion leaders might be for a particular program and why, and doing that all through as well. And then really being able to allow you to kind of trend and understand insights. So there's a lot of technology that we are innovating in, that we're bringing to the table, that's just going to save time, improve the quality of the interactions. And so we're excited about that. Obviously, if you are interested in Within3, you can come to our website and request a demonstration, and we can talk with you further. But I know we have a couple of minutes left. I don't know if we had any a time for a question, Alejandra, or if you wanted us to wrap up.
Yeah, well, I think that we still have time for one of the questions from the public. So this one is for either you, Lance, or Estefania. Do you think that many companies will continue with virtual events even when face-to-face returns?
Yes, my question is yes. My answer, I'm sorry, is yes, for sure. Because as I mentioned, help us to be more included for the audience, to have the feedback and the insights from the key opinion leaders on a very more convenient and flexible way that in the past we used to do it. So and of course we need to establish or to define according to strategic imperatives and objectives, the way that we are going to do it. No, it's not just to do it. We need to have a very clear objectives and a strategy defined behind this kind of activities.
I absolutely agree. I think that the poll from the MSL Society poll you mentioned earlier also reinforces this, that it's moved from this is extraordinarily inconvenient to, in many cases, oh, this is for some parts of my work more efficient and effective. And I think it's here to stay. I think likely everyone believes that to some degree or another. And I think the longer people interact in these virtual environments and they get more comfortable, it will just become more accepted that, of course, my life science company should be interacting with me in multiple different ways, not just one.